Hey everybody, it's the Combatcast. It's the man they call Dave. It's Chevy, and we are going to get ready to talk some combat sports. We got a fight night this weekend, and we're going to talk some other little news and tidbits going on. Chevy, tell people what we got coming up though.
All right, February 10th, UFC Fight Night, Hermanson versus Pfeiffer. That'll another Apex fight, but I'm looking forward to that one. It's a good matchup. And then February 17th, UFC 298, Volkanovski versus Topuria for the featherweight belt, 145 belt. And then February 24th, UFC Fight Night, Moreno versus Royval 2. That's a good flyweight matchup.
Yeah, that is.
I think that's like from Mexico City or something too. Like I think that's in Mexico. So Morano for representing Mexico, main event, should be pretty good card.
Yeah, no, I mean, all those top flyweights are just so technically sound right now, so quick. Like, it's kind of almost hard to believe they're going to get rid of this division. Like, it's such an exciting division. And I feel like, even though they don't bring in the money, that they're just such a nice addition, you know?
Well, they were talking about getting rid of it when DJ was just dominating everyone. It's tough when, the champ is so much better than everyone else.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny you say that because I agree with you, but it's, but people in the past have loved like dominant champions like Mike Tyson, but I guess the
knockouts, though.
He's knocking people out, right? Yeah. So nobody wants to see a dominant, technically blow everybody out champion, I guess.
I feel like in general, fans are more educated to the like technical aspect of combat sports nowadays too, or at least they appreciate it more, So I think that also lends itself to those technical fights being a bit more exciting for fans.
Now, we had some news this week since we last talked. A big fight being announced for UFC 300. I know, kind of polarizing. Some fans weren't excited about it, but I'm actually very interested in the fight.
Yeah, Kayla Harrison versus Holly Holm be contested at 135 pounds. Actually, I never do this, but I got into it with some people on Twitter they were talking about how women's MMA should just be cut from the UFC, and I don't agree with that. Some of the best women's fights we've seen some of the best UFC fights we've seen have been women's fight. Think about that. The first one that comes to mind is that Joanna versus Zhang Weili fight. The first one was one of the best fights of all time. So I don't get that argument, but
even
people are savages.
Even if you went to like recent biasness and said, "Oh, there's nothing been great lately," I would go to Valentina Shevchenko versus Alexa Grasso in that rematch on Mexican Independence Day. That was a hell of a fight too, and it was a draw, and we were all excited about it because it was just a very entertaining fight. So that's strange to me, but MMA does kind of have that fan base where it's just a bunch of savages, knuckle draggers. But yeah, what I find intriguing about this fight is, and look, stylistically, I can see why people think this might be boring. All right, but I find it interesting. At least it's compelling because Holly Holm has such great takedown defense that's where it could get boring, right? If she can shut down Kayla Harrison, we're probably going to have just a point fight in the cage, in the clinch. But Kayla Harrison is a different animal when it comes to takedowns and might be able to get Holm down and have her way with her. But the intriguing part about this is we don't know what kind of Kayla Harrison we're going to have because two things. I would also say too, in no disrespect to her one loss in PFL, but we don't know the quality of a lot of those people because a lot of them didn't have a ton of name value in women's MMA because most dominant women MMA fighters and big names are all in the UFC. Okay, so that's one. And then two, the obvious one I know we're waiting to get to is the weight cut, 135 pounds. This was a woman, I believe, competed in the Olympics around 170. And at one point, so go ahead.
She fought in the PFL at 155 also.
Right, so. At 155. And I think she said she could never make 135 at one point. But that was a quote for her. So clearly UFC wants 135. They have no interest, it looks like, in building a featherweight division at this time. So I'm thinking because UFC does not have to really get involved with this. I think it'd be a waste of their time if they weren't serious. I'm thinking the UFC is probably sending her some nutritionalists, some experts. They're probably working together on this weight cut, and we're going to take a wait and see approach.
Yeah, I believe she said that she's made a test cut. So she has made the weight. The problem, I think, is how many times will she be able to do it, and how will she be able to perform being so diminished? But those are things that we can't possibly know the answer of until fight night. So, based off just the matchup of this fight, which we'll obviously go over when we get to UFC 300. I'm sure this will be on the main card, so I'm sure we'll talk about it. But those exciting women's fight that we were talking about before, Holly Holm hasn't been in an exciting fight since she head kicked Beth Correa.
Right. Yeah.
She's the most boring point fighter in the UFC, I think. Her or Caitlin Chikagian.
Yeah,
so
she has the ability to neutralize her opponents in a way that this does not make for compelling fights. And being that she's going to either win by a boring decision or she'll lose by a boring decision a lot of times, unless she gets caught in a submission once in a while.
Yeah, she has an ability to survive very well, but she does this mostly by getting in these clinch situations on the cage, and that's not going to suit her against two-time gold medalist in judo, Kayla Harrison, because that's where she lives and dies for those takedowns in the clinch. So, we're just going to have to see how strong Kayla is. Yeah, because obviously Holly has dealt with this before with Ronda, who was a bronze medalist in judo, much better suited for the weight. But there was a whole lot of factors in that fight. The overconfidence, and Kayla's striking is definitely better than Ronda's was at that time and all this. But it's not a problem that Holly's never seen before. It's just slightly evolved.
Right. Yeah. We'll have to see. Again, stylistically, and the fight itself, because of the question marks, I find it compelling and interesting. Now, unfortunately, we both know by the time the fight comes, it could be very boring. We'll have to wait and see what happens. But all right, some other news we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, the great John Anik, he was on his podcast recently, and he talked about maybe retiring from the MMA space and moving over to NFL, because in the NFL you don't have to deal with the lowest common denominator. So he doesn't like the way the fan base is always negative online. He used the words malice and disrespect. Basically, they were talking, attacking him, in his words, about how he was justifying DDP winning over Sean Strickland at 297. So, well, what are your thoughts on this? He's recently walked it back, saying, that he was emotional in the moment and all that. And I think that, a lot of people came out in support of John for sure. So I think that helped him walk it back a little bit. But what do you think about this?
I think that everything was right. I think that there's a ton of negativity. I'm glad he walked it back, because really, who gives a shit about these people? I get it from John's standpoint. In a way, he's so good at what he does. He puts so much work in it. He's an artist, and I can see where emotionally at times it's going to get the better of him, and I think he put it in pretty good words in his statement that, he was, when he walked it back, and, he kind of apologized for it, but I thought that was unnecessary. You don't have to apologize, John. We were all entitled to have those moments when you got people unnecessary attacking you. First off, I don't know. Like, it's not even like subjective to me really that much. Everything's subjective, but it's so hard to think that like the John Anik comes off as biased. This guy comes off as the epitome of a professional, and that's what the thing was, right? They thought he was being biased against Strickland, and for DDP. And it's like, oh man, I don't even want to say this, but whatever, fuck it. That's the mindset of a lot of people who are so, engulfed in this Sean Strickland. I don't want to say persona because it seems to be legit who he is, but this fan base. All right. And
right, these people need to take a look at themselves that maybe they are the biased ones.
Absolutely, because this was a close fucking fight, but we get this all the time. And even like Conor McGregor, who we've both kind of trashed at different times, for recently stuff too. And we realized there could be a favoritism. But when you look at that second fight with Nate Diaz, that was such a close fight. But boy, when that decision came and he was going to get it, and I knew there was a chance he was going to, I knew people were, that's a fucking robbery. That's a fucking robbery. And I feel like this was going to be the same thing. Strickland has just got such a hardcore fan base now that any of these fights that are close, that's the mindset. My guy's a warrior. He fucking put his ass out there and the UFC robbed him. And it's like, no. And a guy like John Anik is just going to call it how he see it. And by the way, everybody said the fucking fight was close. So I don't know what you want,
Yeah. John Anik shouldn't be spending any time online reading comments on his Twitter for sure. He's way too famous for that, especially in the MMA space. I mean, we have social media, because technically we're content creators or whatever. We get some horrific shit on our social media as well. And we're nowhere near John Anik, just imagine the shitstorm that's coming at him, so.
I mean, I was doing that watch along for the podcast at the Royal Rumble the other night. I had somebody trolling me, and I had a feeling, they're asking me, Eric Rowan, one of these wrestlers, you wouldn't know. He's like, is he going to be on tonight? And I'm like, nah, I don't think so. And right away, I'm like, that's a weird fucking name to bring up. But I'm like, I'll play along for a little bit. And then the guy's like, it's a shame Bray Wyatt died. And I'm like, yeah, it was, blah, blah. And then it was like a shame Luke Harper died. And I'm like, okay. And, and then he said something. Anybody know why he died? And, we kept kind of keeping the flow going. We throw this guy. And then he was like, what were your thoughts on Chris Benoit? I'm like, this motherfucker. So I still kept it up until that point. I'm like, you're a good wrestler, but I was not really a fan of how things ended. And then he said, why did he have to die? And I'm like, all right, fuck this guy. He's out. You know what I mean? Like, that's just, somebody had nothing better to do on a fucking Saturday night. He stumbled upon our stream and was like, I'm going to fuck with these guys.
This is how I want to spend my time. Yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine poor John Anik. But anyway, yeah, I think we're in agreement here. Not going to be much of a fight. John, don't waste your time with these guys. Glad to see you're in a better headspace about it. And yeah, totally nothing but support for John.
Right. You're a legend. Fuck those guys. Don't listen to the haters.
Absolutely. Let's get to this week's fight night.
All right. Apex Fight Night coming at you. Not the most exciting fight on paper. Doesn't mean it won't translate to an excellent fight card with lots of matchups. Bree, I'll let you know this going into it. Yeah, I won't be watching this one. I got some birthday celebrations going on. I'm going away this weekend, so you'll be carrying the load next week for talking about these fights. But a couple matchups, prelims. Molly McCann's on there fighting a girl she's already beat before. I think the UFC is just trying to get her a win at this point to keep her persona going or aura with her and Patty. But good luck to her. Move on to, let's just get right in the co-main event. Renato Moicano versus Drew Dober. This is probably my favorite fight on the card.
Couldn't agree more. All right, Moicano, 17-5-1, 10 subs, 7 decisions. Fight of the night, one time against Brian Ortega. This was a fight he was actually winning against Brian, and then Brian came back. Performance of the night against Cub Swanson. He's tied Charles Oliveira and Brendan Allen for third most rear naked submissions in UFC history. So if this guy gets the rear naked choke, it's probably going to be done so.
You're naming a lot of featherweights in this, which I'll talk about in mine, but continue on.
Right, yes. So, right. That's the other thing, the weight class. But, and if I didn't say it, I don't remember if I did, but he is 17-5-1, 10 subs, 7 decision. 10 subs. No knockouts there. That doesn't mean he can't throw down. I've seen him knock people down before. But high level at featherweight. All right. It'll be a lightweight contest. Drew Dober, 27, 12, and 1, 14 KOs, 6 subs, 7 decisions. Before I even get into the rest of these championship stats here, these performance bonuses here and stuff, those 14 KOs, I would say is deceiving. This guy actually should probably have more fucking knockouts. Like, he has fire in his hands.
Yeah.
So, yes, Drew Dober, fight of the night 3 times, performance of the night 4 times, most knockouts in UFC lightweight division history. So that's that I didn't even know, but I believe it. Tied Tony Ferguson and Donald Cerrone for 4th most finishes in UFC lightweight division history. So he's a finisher. He's an exciting fighter. Moicano, a submission guy, very exciting too, but it's a submission guy versus a knockout power guy. Chevy kind of alluded to it. I'm going to let him talk a little more. Drew is used to fighting at this weight class a lot more fights at this weight class for that reason and the power. And Drew is a really good all-around fighter who just doesn't get taken down to his back that easy. I'm going to go with Drew Dober, and I'm going to say that power in his hands is the difference. Moicano's tough, but I got Dober, round 2, TKO.
Yeah, striker versus grappler. Normally, I would pick the grappler, but I think the size will be a difference, as you alluded to. Renato used to fight at 145. I can't really picture Drew making it down to 145. He's a pretty big kid for 155. So I think he's going to use that size to fight off the takedowns long enough in the back takes, because Moicano will take his back standing like Charles does. But I think he fights that off long enough to touch Moicano's chin, and that's really all it takes for Drew. So I'm going to pick round 2 KO for Drew Dober.
Okay, we're in agreement.
Yep. All right, let's move on. Main event, Roman Dolidze versus Nassourdine Imavov.
Imavov is 12-4-1, 5 KOs, 4 subs, 3 decisions. He's won 3 out of his last 5. He is coming off a no contest with Chris Curtis.
Had that headbutt, accidental headbutt or something.
Accidental headbutt, yeah. And Roman 12-2, 7 KOs, 3 subs, 2 decisions. His only 2 losses were by decision too, so he hasn't been finished. It's an interesting fight. I feel like Roman maybe hasn't had the strength of competition out of these 2. But that being said, I kind of like him in this one. I think it's going to be a close fight. I think he might have a power advantage, but I don't know. I'll let you discuss that a little more. I'm going to go with Roman. I'm going to say decision, though.
Nassourdine is inconsistent. On his best day, he looks like a world beater. But if he doesn't bring his best, it's tough to watch a lot of his fights. But I think Roman's going to bring the best out of him. He's a dangerous opponent. But I don't think he's so dangerous that it's going to shake Imavov's confidence going in there. So I'm going to pick Imavov. I think he gives Roman his first TKO loss. I think he catches him. He stands at range, sniping him, and then catches him coming in with an elbow or a knee or something. I'll say round 3 TKO for Imavov. Not feeling super confident about that one. I just got a weird feeling about it.
All right. Well, we'll see. We definitely agree on the first one. Second one, we have to disagree. So, all right. Let's tell people we got coming up.
All right. February 10th, UFC Fight Night, Hermansson versus Pfeiffer. Then February 17th, UFC 298, Volkanovski versus Topuria. Looking forward to that one. And then February 24th, UFC Fight Night, Moreno versus Royval 2.
All right. Some good, exciting fights coming up. And guys, Chevy won't see it this weekend, but try to watch the fight.